Hakim Isler, ninja, survivalist, and the Black MacIver coming your way on Paradise in the Pines. Welcome to Paradise in the Pines, a podcast about the people, places, and stories that make this the home of American golf. Brought to you by the Pinehurst, Southern Pines, Aberdeen Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. Welcome to Paradise in the Pines. We're joined by Hakim Isler, ninja, survivalist, and the Black MacIver. Man, that's pretty bold goings on there, man. What led to all that?
Which part first?
Yeah, right. I mean, this is a big onion to peel here.
Yeah,
Hakim. Basically, we're inspired because you moved to the area, to Moore County, to the Robbins area to start the Soil Foundation. We'll do that. Tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and what brought you to this area first.
Yeah, so I'm originally from New Jersey, and at some point in my 20s, about 2021, I came up with this idea that I wanted to be a ninja, right? And
I think Teenage Ninja Turtles, that's the only ninja background I got. So, but I mean, totally different world there. So you were interested in the ninja culture.
Yeah, the ninja martial arts. And believe it or not, the guy who went to Japan and brought it to America, he's known as the father of American ninjutsu, lived in Ohio. And he had a school in Dayton, Ohio. So very committed. I was very committed to martial arts and learning martial arts. I had been doing it my whole life. And I went to Dayton, Ohio to check it out. Fell in love with it, came back, saved up $1,200, got a small apartment in the slum of Dayton, Ohio, and started training with him as his personal student.
And what age were you at that time?
I was about 21 back then. Yeah. And so that was my journey. And then after learning those skill sets, outdoor training, experiential training, how to defend yourself against all different types of threats, mental, emotional, and physical. The time came for, me to say, well, what am I going to really do with this? And 9/11 had just happened. And I was talking to a gentleman who was in the military, and he was PSYOP. And I was going to go in. I had already kind of thought I was going to do special forces. Yeah. And he said, well, if you go in as special forces, you might get hurt, and then you'll go to kind of like the needs of the Army. But if you go in as PSYOP, that's what the ninja did. They were these psychological warfare people, and because they had lower numbers and they had this understanding of the human psyche. And I was like, man, that's super appealing. He said, and then you can try out for SF. And if you get hurt, special forces, if you get hurt, you just go back to PSYOP and you stay in the community. They're all special operations. So that's how I ended up in the Army. That brought me to Fayetteville, North Carolina, Fort Bragg. Yeah. And then, it all started growing from there.
So go a little bit deeper into the ninja culture. I mean, you say that, and I think people have a connotation of what that means. What does that specifically mean? What are some of the disciplines that you have to learn and continually learn and hone as you perform that skill?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So the ninja were a group of people who lived in like the mountain regions of Japan. Mm-hmm. And during the time, the way Japan worked was that if you had a shogun or emperor or something like that, everybody did what that group did. And it was very hierarchical. So it was like this class system. And if you were a peasant, then, you were looked down upon. And sometimes samurai would even be able to just kill you on the street, and nobody would ask anything because you were just such a low class. So the ninja people, their villages didn't even show up on maps sometime. And what ended up happening was they were kind of getting backlash from not being a part of the standard culture. They were just kind of these mountain people living up in the wilderness, and nobody knew what they were doing. And so, hillbillies. So that became a threat to a community that wanted total control. And so then you started having this push to kind of make these people assimilate or they would die. And so these people were like, hey, we're just out here, wilderness people trying to get in touch with nature, gain some enlightenment, also love our families. But these folks keep coming up here and harming us. What do we do? And they came up with the ninja combat system. So they already had, the people already had this kind of like way of understanding nature in the world. And then they said, okay, we're going to use that to help us understand how to defend ourselves. Right. And because these guys have better equipment, more fighting skill, the samurai, they grow up that way. we need to figure out how we're going to deal with that. And they knew about the psyche, they knew about how people operated, what they thought, and they used that as the foundation of their system. The actual term ninja means one who endures, one who perseveres. It doesn't mean like, climb a mountain or chop a guy in the head. It's like, basically, what do you need, or any individual training in it, need to endure or persevere? And all of us we need to understand our physical bodies. We need to understand our minds. We need to understand our spirit and our emotionality. That is the way we can survive and thrive best in our communities.
It almost seems like in layman's terms, in today's world, in my world, it almost seems like work-life balance.
Yes.
To have the balance of the enlightenment, the peace, and yet you have this other portion of that, I wouldn't say violent, but the combat side.
Yes.
Combat side.
Yes.
How did that, because you arrived in the Army with that skill,
yes,
at the start of that discipline, how did they take that when you joined the Army?
So I was very adamant about no one knowing that I knew what I knew when I came in the Army, because I didn't want to be a target and I didn't want it to turn into this thing. And so I was just like, oh, okay. So even when we went through the combatives,
because the guys would be like, yeah, here's this ninja.
Exactly. Either they would make fun of it or they would test it.
Yeah.
And I had other things that I was worried about. And so I was like, I'm not going to tell anybody.
Yeah.
And so it's really funny because even when we went through the combatives program, I had been at that time training since I was 8 years old. So I think it was like almost 20 years, or no, it was like 18 years or something like that, or 17 years that I had been training in martial arts up to that point. Everything from karate to kickboxing to boxing. I had done all these different things, and then I found ninjutsu. And so when we started doing combatives, I was like, I have to make basic mistakes.
Yeah.
If I want to sell this.
Sure.
So I would like pretend get tapped out and like do stupid stuff that a beginner would do, and people. So people who came through basic training with me and ended up meeting me later, and they found out what I was doing, they were like, man, you had that skill the whole time. I remember you were like making all these stupid mistakes. And I was like, you
were just playing.
I was playing. That was part of it. It wasn't about ego for me. I was there for a purpose. And that's one of the gifts of ninjutsu, is that we don't get wrapped up in, I have to be the toughest.
The emotional part.
The emotional part. It's just like, what is the mission and what's the goal and how do I best achieve that goal? And my mission was learning and being like everybody else and being able to get the information that I did. I didn't need to be on a pedestal. I didn't want to be a target. Those all create things that you have to worry about that isn't part of the main focus, which is to become the best soldier that I could be and really understand what psychological operations means for me going forward as a soldier for the country.
Once they found out you had that skill, did that elevate you even more in the PSYOP in the Army?
Some people who knew and understood, they knew that I was thinker. That's kind of where this kind of Black MacGyver, moniker, this name came from later on, is that I was always thinking out of the box. I had very unique ways of dealing with issues and seeing things. And, the ninja have this kind of elemental structure, which kind of makes us different. We have earth, wind, water, fire, void. You may hear that from other stuff or like cartoons. But it really is a way of looking at the world that helps you understand how you can relate to other people. And as a true ninja master, how you can move through. So for instance, if you're my leader and you're fire mentality, meaning that you are driven, passionate, somebody who but I'm also a fire person. Well, we just end up clashing, right? But if you're a fire person and I'm a fire person and I'm a ninja and I understand this concept, then I'd say, oh, well, me being fire is not going to best serve Phil in this particular scenario. Me being wind, which air feeds fire, and understanding how to be that well is really what's going to help you succeed the most. So I have to set my nature aside a little bit and then convincingly become a new nature for the purpose of serving the team to the betterment of the overall group. That's super challenging, right?
Yeah.
Because most people are like, I am who I am. This is what I am. I was raised this way, and so this is the only way I know how to be. But to be able to flow through different states of being because you're so in tune with who you are and how you operate is a power and an ability that can serve anyone in any walk of life, And so that's what the ninja system really teaches.
I'm going to get into how you translated that out of the Army, but in the Army, where did you serve specifically, and how many years did you serve? When did you get out?
Yeah, I was tactical PSYOP. I did 4 years, and I spent most of that actually in this long, crazy deployment in Iraq. And then I got out early. I had a family at the time, a wife at the time, and she just was not excited about me doing more, because my original goal was to come in, do PSYOP, do SF, then go to the unit, and then, or Delta, and then try out for that and see if I could be PSYOP there. But I got a surprise when I came back from my last deployment, and she was just like, it's either me or the military. And, you know, I am very much about family. So I was just like, okay, well, maybe this is God telling me I need to kind of step away and like focus on family and see what's going on there. And, so that's what I did. I ended up moving away from the Army, and that was basically what started the next transition of my life, which was going into teaching martial arts and really diving into the survival realm.
You mentioned the Black MacGyver. How did you get that name? Is that self-proclaimed? You got that name? How did that all come about?
It was a joke. So in PSYOP, we're always making fun of each other. And I mean, that's the Army,
awesome.
Period, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I would always come up with these crazy ideas that would make people say, yeah, that could work, you know? And it'd be like, okay, how are we going to make this population think this way, or make this group do this thing, you know, as PSYOP, you know? And then I'd say, well, I have an idea, you know, let's try this, that, and the other. And then people would be like, yeah, that's interesting. And then I was always creating. And so people was like, man, you're like MacGyver, you're like the Black MacGyver, you know? And then somebody was like, oh, that's so funny. And it just stuck. And it was just something that we would say. And then later I started to do other things in the world, and people would say, hey, you're making inventions, you're writing books, you have all of these different accolades, and you are always creating. You take something and make it into anything, or find a way to make it work. And that really, again, goes to that kind of ninja concept of use what you got. You know, they didn't have the best weapons, they didn't have the best everything, but they were able to figure out a way to persevere and endure.
You call it ninjanuity.
Ninjanuity, yes, exactly. Somebody was watching that show. Yeah, my ninjanuity, my ability to kind of look at the problem and just figure it out, and adapt. That's really what it's about.
You talk about the TV shows you've been on, Naked and Afraid, and Fox's Kicking and Screaming. How did you get on those shows? How do you audition for those? That's pretty cool.
So Naked and Afraid was the first, and that actually was a friend of mine, a Special Forces friend. We would always get together, have some coffee, and one day we were talking about survival, and he was like, you ever heard of this show, Naked and Afraid? I was like, no. He told me about it, and he was like, I would like to see, you know, you out there doing that type of thing, and it kind of became like this like challenge, and so I was like, oh, I'm going to go and fill out an application. And then the next time I'll tell them that I tried, but it didn't work. And so I filled this application out, and like a month or two later, I get this call, and they're like, hey, we think you'd be great. Let's try you out, you know, and I did an audition. And
how do you audition for Naked and Afraid?
So it's really weird. They have a guy or a girl call you, but in my case, it was a guy, and they ask you like survival questions, you know, like, and I mean, that to me didn't really say much, because it's like anybody could just come up with anything. But, you know, they were like, if you did this, you do that. And they have you send in a video of you doing some skills. And that's basically the gist of it. And after that, they just make a determination. They'll have you come out and do a psych evaluation to make sure you're not going to, you know, try to chop somebody up while you're out there. And if you pass that, then you kind of can move forward. So
I've seen the show, but I haven't seen Kicking and Screaming. What was that show about? Dan, have you seen that show?
No, Alone's the only one I've watched.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a great show. Actually, I would love to do Alone, with the exception of there's no time limit. So as a business owner, I can't just be like, hey guys, I'm leaving and I'm not sure when I'll be back.
Right.
It's the real deal, though. You can tell when you watch that it's all survival.
Was that the show you had a friend that was in Alaska? And okay,
she fell out from dysentery, but she did really good up until
she fell out from dysentery.
Yeah. It's a great show. I love that show. And Kicking and Screaming was a little bit different. It was more about the comedy of it. So they took several survival instructors, 10 survival instructors, 10 what they call like high society type people who were like actors, actresses, and, very wealthy in different communities, and but they had no survival background.
They just wanted a good personality mix.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Because I got to think about it as a show and the drama and all that stuff.
And so one survival person would get paired up with one of these individuals, and we had to kind of keep them alive. And meanwhile, we were like challenging each other. And my partner was actually one of the Baywatch actresses.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
Her name was Angelica Bridges. And there was times when I woke up and I'd be like looking for food, and I'd be like, "Where's Angelica?" And I'd go and I'd find her somewhere like in the sun, like putting makeup on, like no. And I'm just like, "What are you doing? I gotta look good." It's like, no, we gotta feed ourselves.
Right.
Like that's what's important today. And so just seeing those type of things, and that's what it was. It was kicking and screaming, like the idea that these guys were dragged out there kicking and screaming, and they didn't want to be there.
Awesome experience, great exposure. Well,
yeah.
Exposure, and also another way too, being exposed to the elements. But talk about you talk about survive, defend, and escape.
Yes.
What does that mean?
So survive, defend, and escape are all of the aspects that I really like to focus on. Is like, how do I survive different scenarios and different situations? And they don't always have to be like physical, like I'm dying survival. It could just be like anxiety and stress and depression. That takes a lot of people out. How do I defend against those things? What tools do I have to help me work through depression, anxiety, or flood, or something like what happened in Western North Carolina recently? And then escape. If I need to get out of there, always thinking about like mobility equals survivability. If I need to get out of there, how do I get out of there? What tools do I have to help that? And and so it's those words sometimes have a very direct meaning, but I play with them a little bit, because escape could just be like, I don't want to be here talking to this person, and so what tools do I have to get myself out of this at this particular time? Or it could be something more drastic, like somebody walks into a store and starts shooting it up. How do I get out? How do I survive and defend and escape this scenario? So it has multiple meanings.
I remember in my TV career, we used to do this outdoor segment with this guy named Claudie Taylor. So pre-dawn, we go driving out. This is near New Bern, North Carolina. We go out to the middle of Croatan National Forest. We're driving a good half hour into the middle of this wilderness. And this guy was kind of like, if you remember Yul Gibbons. Yul Gibbons was like a survivalist. I think he did grape nuts commercials back in the day. But anyway, we're in the middle of this forest, and Claudie's like, if I let you out of this truck right now, could you find your way back? And I'm like, hell no. I said, I would die probably within the hour. So give us a scenario there, like if you're in the middle of nowhere, and how do you survive? How do you eat? How do you make a fire? How do you do all these things? If God forbid one of us is like somehow, some way in that kind of scenario, how do you survive?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. What I always say as a ninja practitioner, but also as a teacher, is that I'm going to give you tools, and when I train you, but the reality, the greatest tool is your ability to recognize that every situation is dependent on the situation, right? Like how you look at that and view it. Because I can't tell you that you're only going to have to survive in the wilderness or on the beach or in the desert, right? So I can only give you some tools, and then you have to be able to adapt based on where you are. And so the first thing is you have to look at the environment that you're in and the situation that you're in, and really evaluate that. And so am I in a hot environment? So is it really, if I'm in a warm environment, is it really important for me to get like this super shelter, right? Or can I do without a shelter for a little while and just find like a tree to find some shade or something of that nature? Am I in a very rainy and cold environment? Okay, so me finding a tree with some shade is still not going to be good enough. I need to actually build a shelter. So those are two different ideas that I'm thinking about. Is this a situation where I need to wait in place? Or is this a situation where it's going to get really bad here, and I know that because of whatever reason, maybe a storm's coming in or something of that nature, so I cannot wait right here, right? But people, when they start looking for me, may end up here, so how do I tell them where I went? So you're thinking about through all of those different ideas and those different concepts. If I do need a fire at night to keep myself warm, then I need to think about how much firewood I need. I need to think about if I stay up all night keeping the fire tended, then I'm going to be in bad shape tomorrow because I'm going to be tired, and I'm not going to be thinking there's only so much time so many days you can do that and still be on top of your game,
Yeah.
And so you're going to have these diminishing returns. So how am I looking at my scenario? And I think that's the biggest thing. It's just really giving you a survival mindset, step one. And then once you have that, the hard skills are fun, because sometimes I think we grow this kind of idea that in order to be a survivalist, you have to have a ton of survival skills. And the survival skills are that I have to be able to do a bow drill, and I have to be able to make a bow and arrow. And really, human beings were surviving well before they even knew that. They had like a rock and a stick, and we made it this far. So they evolved and they changed over time, but they didn't have a lot at the beginning. So I always tell people, if a squirrel can live through the winter, every winter, a human being should be able to figure out how to survive. And a squirrel can't make fire, and it doesn't have these cool tools and all the gadgets and that we want and have in our bug out bags, but they figure it out. So how can we figure it out? And so that always gives, when I start a class like that, that gives a person a decent level of confidence. And then I say, hey, really understand the tools that I'm providing for you psychologically and mentally. And then we can build off of that. That's what really makes a survivalist, because you don't know what you're going to have and where you're going to have. You might have everything in your go bag, but then you took your family on a trip to the Bahamas, and now there's this huge, tsunami that came in, and you guys don't have anything. You don't have your cool little siphon and water filter, and you just got to figure it out. So if you know how a water filter works, now you might be able to figure out how to make one out of the tools that you have there, which I was not able to provide for you that knowledge because I didn't know you were going to be in that situation when you came to my class. I had a very specific set of things that I taught you, and the best one for me is that ability to see your problem and make your way through it, the Black MacGyver way.
I hear you. Destination storyteller and former survivalist. Dan Dreyer is behind the camera. He's our podcast producer. Dan actually spent some time in Utah as a survivalist for drug addicts, right?
Yeah. I worked as a chief instructor for a company called Wilderness Quest, and we took drug addicts out into the high desert there, the high Sierra Nevadas, and we would walk from. It was very, very light, not quite naked and afraid, nothing, but we had a shoestring and a tarp, and we did like you were saying, bow drill. We took them through hard skills and traps and things. Yeah. Everything you're saying is so fascinating and interesting. I really like this squirrel analogy. That's a great point that a lot of people miss. That survivalists really it's 90% of just a mental, just perseverance in a mental game. Yeah. You're talking about those shows where we mentioned Alone a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you think about when you're watching other people? Do you watch other people trying to do outdoor survival or
Yeah, I like to watch Alone. I haven't watched the last few seasons, but when I see it, it's always fascinating. Yeah. And I think what to the point that I was making earlier, what's really great about that is they have all of these tools, but really the psychological stuff is what gets so many people. Mm-hmm. It's they have the cool saw, and they have the cool cold weather gear, and they have all of that. But then you start jumping into their mind, and that normally is what gets people.
And doubt creeps in, and other things,
and then
fatigue,
and things. It's one thing where if you're well fed and you can go back to somewhere, that's a different story. Yeah. But when you aren't well fed and you're not really sure where you're going, it changes the whole dynamic of everything. Psychologically, it can really defeat you really fast. And something that maybe you're doing a bow drill today and you didn't get it, and you're like, man, this sucks, I'm gonna have to live through the night. But you're at a survival class.
Yeah,
it is not the same feeling as when you're out in the cut somewhere and you're like, I wasn't able to do that.
Yeah,
I'm not sure what's gonna happen. I did a show called First Man Out, and we were in China, in the mountains of China, and and they were like, hey, we got to stop here. It's a race between you and this other guy. We got to stop you guys at the same. And I was in the most craziest position. I was on this mountain somewhere.
Okay.
Like, and it was like wet and nasty and there was no shelter. And I was like, I would never stop here. I would go at least a little while long. And they were like, well, that's the game, man. Like, we got to stop you here. And so,
so you were bounded within like a kilometer or whatever
yeah,
when they dropped you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
So
yeah.
no, you could travel pretty far, but we had to, whenever it was a race time, and to make it equal,
Yeah.
they had to stop us at the same time. You know, and so wherever you were at that time was it. And they wouldn't always tell you when you were going to stop, which also was very frustrating.
You couldn't prepare.
Yeah. And so then, but that was part of the drama, you know? And so then they're like, you got to make a fire right here. So I pull out this bamboo, and I was going to do a bamboo fire saw, but the sun's going down. So it's like, oh my gosh. And so I'm like trying to do this bamboo fire saw, and it's just not working. It's not working. And the level of panic because I knew how cold it got at night that you start feeling. I was actually like,
you were high up too.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We're super high elevation. And I was ready to quit because I was just like, bro,
They're not going to make it.
I'm not going to make it. This is going to be the scariest thing. And they actually show a clip because I didn't make it. I had to end up making a shelter. And they show a clip of me like boxing with a tree. And it's like, and that's how I made it through the night. I was just doing burning calories. I was like, fighting
moving.
a tree and doing all this stuff.
I've got food right in here.
Yeah.
And that was my whole night, and it was the worst night ever. You know, and that also I had to fight through that the next day to even just say, because then you start playing games. Well, I burned so many calories. He probably didn't burn calories. I can't go. I'm not going to win this. I should just quit, you know, and you have to fight through all of that. And that has nothing to do with whether or not you can do a bow drill. You know, like it has everything to do with whether or not when you have a failure, can you recover, and how do you recover? And that carries over into the addiction realm, right? That's why survival classes and doing it for things like addiction and people who have different challenges is very important, because you really start to understand what it's like to sometimes succeed, sometimes not succeed, but always be able to pull yourself together so that you can face the next challenge.
Let's bring this closer to home, specifically Moore County. What brought you here? And talk about the Soil Foundation. This is your new business here in Moore County, I think near the Robbins area.
Yeah.
Talk about coming to Moore County, establishing that business, and what the Soil Foundation is all about.
Yes, the SOIL stands for Seed of Indigenous Learning. And so what I feel is that many indigenous cultures from around the world knew that having a person spend time in nature, back to the connection of nature, really helped heal. Warriors have been around forever, right? And so before we knew what PTSD was, I think these cultures knew that, hey, when warriors go off to war and they come back, they're changed, and we need a way to pull them back together. And so they would have them sit out in the wilderness or do walkabouts or spend time with their shamans or priests or whatever. And when I was on Naked and Afraid, I had an awakening, and I had PTSD, symptoms of PTSD that I had not believed that were there. And what ended up happening was I came back, like I told you, I got back from my last deployment. I actually had 6 months left in the Army. I was all geared up to re-sign, go try out for SF, and then move. And then 2 years later, I was going to try out for the unit. My ex-wife knew all of that. She was having problems with depression. I had lost some friends over there and people that I knew while I was deployed, but we compartmentalize real well. And I'm really good at being task oriented. So the new task now was like, how do I keep my family together? You know, like, and then like, okay, well, I'm going to have to get out. Okay, well, now what am I going to do for a living now that I'm out? I had to figure that out. Then me and my wife ended up splitting. So then it was like, okay, what do I look like without her? And it was just all of this stuff. And it was just mission in my mind. And then all of a sudden I go on Naked and Afraid a couple years later, and I'm on the side of the Himalaya mountains in India. And I don't have anything to hide behind.
Yeah.
There are no friends to talk to. There are no like busy tasks other than doing the survival stuff. But there's a lot of just sitting around stoking the fire because it's nighttime and it's freezing outside and you can't do anything. And then all this stuff just started coming out. And I was like, whoa, what is this? And I found healing in that. And I was like, I have to bring this back to my community and give other soldiers and people an opportunity to kind of zero out. And that's where the idea of the Soil Foundation was born. I did not know how I was going to afford land. I did not know any of this other stuff. I just knew that I had to be able to provide it. And God provided. I mean, the way I was able to find the land, the story behind it was just not humanly possible. There was a divine intervention there to make that happen. And that was how I was able to find the property, get the property, and then grow it to what I have today. And now we're going to be providing these like retreats for not just soldiers, but kids now.
Yeah.
Kids with anxiety and depression because they're so locked into the technology. You know, I've done stuff with the YMCAs, and I'd be amazed when I see kids and they come out there and they're like, oh, I don't want to touch that. And what's that? And I hear things and I'm not sure what's happening. And then within like 20 minutes or 30 minutes of being out there, all of a sudden they're like climbing on trees, and you're like, what? Who is this person? This person two minutes ago were like, I don't want anything to do out here. And now I'm having to almost rein them in. Like, hey guys, there's still snakes out here, and there's some, you know, you got to be careful. You know, you can't just go out and you know, cut like that. And so there's something there. It's magic. It's magic. I have a theory, you know, depending on what people's different belief systems are. But if you believe that God made us from clay and earth, you know, then that means we and nature we're one. We're one.
Yeah.
So the further we get away from that, technology is great, but the further we get away from that, the harder it is for us to be able to do the things that we normally do. And when we start getting back to that, all of a sudden this healing happens. Doctors prescribe sunlight now. Walk out in the sun. You need it. You know, if you don't, you're going to continue to get worse. Go into a park and look at a tree. You need it. If you don't do it, then you're going to continue to get worse. It's like, where's that coming from?
When the kids are, you know, constantly scrolling and you know, they're not engaging, they don't have communication, they don't have conversations.
Yes.
Mental health, I'm sure, becomes an issue.
Yes.
So you said it's not just you could do corporate retreats or team building, things like that. So where how do we get in touch with you? It's soilfoundation.com.
.org. Yeah.
.org.
The Soil Foundation.
TheSoilFoundation.org.
Yeah.
They go there, get in touch. How long would be your session? Is it a daily session, go on for a few days or a couple weeks, or talk about your program?
That's a beautiful question. So I've actually had it where you can go for a day, you can go for a weekend, or you can go for a full week. And so we have all of those different options for folks to be able to come out and spend time with us. And then I can do different retreats. I've had lawyers out there, patent attorneys who have like really high stress jobs. I've had military out there. I've had, like I said, youth out there from different backgrounds, and I'm able to pull them all in these different ways and then help them with their different issues.
Just give us an example. Say it was a 1 day session. What would we typically do to, and what would be the goal at the end of that to come away with?
So it would depend on if you're doing like survival just or mindfulness, right? And so I have a background in both. I've done yoga therapy for over 5 years now, working on getting certified in that. Also, I'm working on almost 1 semester away from my degree in integrative health medicine with a focus on herbal medicine. So I have a multitude of things we can do. If you're coming for the survival realm, the day would be like, how can I take you through your basic survival skills? We need a way to keep ourselves thermoregulated, right? We need a way to provide ourselves with clean water. We need a way to then provide some food for ourselves or something of that nature. So that's looking like maybe shelter, water, fire, and then traps or something of that nature. So if we have like a full day, then I'm going to start teaching you about that mindset. How do you think? Then I'm going to start teaching you, let's go build a shelter. Here are the things that you need to build a shelter. This will help you keep thermoregulated in a really bad situation. And here's some ways that you can find water and purify water. When I was on Naked and Afraid, we had no pots or anything. When I went through, now I think they give you a pot and things. I had to dig a seep, a well, by hand like every 3 days. And it was just too much. You know, they're covering 21 days in like one 42-minute show. Yeah. So they couldn't show me digging a seep every day or every 3 days.
Right. It's not compelling for TV.
Yeah. But, you know, being able to use that, and that was one of the ways that I stay hydrated. So how do you filter? Well, I was like, well, I don't have the tools to filter out here, but I know the planet does it really well. So let me go ahead and dig this hole and then have the earth filter for me. And then I'm going to take again, there's still things that I'd have to worry about, but I was able to survive just like that without having to boil water. So maybe not that drastic, but just the idea that there's water and ways that you can get it. How do the animals get it? How does the planet actually make fresh water for us? If you know that, you can Black MacGyver your way. You can can use your ingenuity to figure it out, right? And so that's really the ultimate thing that we would do in that day class. In a week, I would go more in depth in those topics.
Yeah.
We would do more different types of shelters, build those shelters. We can have couples come and they can do it, or we can have families come and they can do it together. We've had those as well. And then how to build up that shelter for you to be able to have water there and fire there and boil it and keep yourself warm. And then maybe if you're having to go on the move, leave that shelter and go somewhere. How do you plan for that? How do you leave a direction of where you went? What are you going to take with you? Things of that nature. So we talk about that in the survival classes. And the mindfulness classes, it is where are you? What are you comfortable with? That's really what I need to know. And then we're going to help you understand, because a lot of people say, well, I can't be mindful and I can't do breath work or calm myself down, because every time I shut my eyes, then all chaos breaks loose, right? And so teaching a person basic foundational information on how to just get themselves to be calm for a little while and quiet, and then how to slowly extend that out. You meet a person where they're at, right? So if you're having extreme anxiety all the time, and then I just say, sit in this chair and meditate, it's not going to work for you. I have to meet you where you are, and I have to bring you down to that space. And so being clever about understanding where a person is and what it is that they need in that moment, and then slowly bringing them to a place of where they want to be, is the best way for us. And that's what our mindfulness classes do. And I build those classes based on who I know is coming, because some people might be introverted, some people might be extroverted, some people might be dealing with extreme anxiety, some people might be dealing with extreme depression. So I can't meet the anxiety person and the depression person in the same exact space. So if I have more people who are dealing with depression in the class, then I can make the class designed for that group. Then if I have somebody dealing with anxiety, I can make it for that.
Dan's got a question.
Yeah, I have a question. I mean, it sounds like you're talking about helping people with some problems that take a long time to work through, like going from that high anxiety person to the person who can occupy that space in a chair, for example. I mean, that could be weeks, months. So are these classes that are available to the public that they can come to week on week or month on month, or are they one-offs?
That's the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is that the Soil Foundation will be a campus where people can come consistently. Right now, and that's the challenge, is we want to build a facility out there where people can come and stay, and then they can come back, because we're going to build an herbal garden out there. So, and then teach people how to raise lavender and then dry it out and then turn it into a tincture. And then that can be used for helping wounds, or it can be used, you can make it into a salve for helping wounds, or make it to calm your system and calm your nervous system, turn it into a lotion or a bedtime, nighttime rest thing. So that would be something where you might come a series of days, right? Or you might come to a class this week, which is like a level 1, and come back 2 weeks later for like a level 2. And so that's really where we want to get to, is that we can do that. Right now, we're kind of at a point where we can only work with a person for like a week or 2, and then they go home and then they come back. But once we build the facilities out, then we're going to be able to keep people for longer periods of time, and then be able to see them consistently, so that we can work through some of those deeper issues and challenges that they're really trying to overcome.
Wow, it's fascinating. I mean, we could sit here and talk about this for hours. Wish you the best of luck in Moore County. It's a soilfoundation.org. You do have some books. If people go to Amazon, what books can that you've published can people?
So I have Tales from a Modern Ninja Kid that they can get. That's one about teaching. I have the ninja. We have a code, and that code this young man goes through a day, which is like a lot of chaos, and he uses that code to navigate the day. I have Ninja Extreme Wilderness Survival, so that's or Extreme Wilderness Survival, and that book is basically about like how the ninja would look at survival, right? And from what perspective. So it has a lot of cerebral aspects to it, as well as a lot of like physical things that you can do. Modern hand-to-hand combat, I do a correlation between modern soldier armor and old Japanese armor, and how that technology has not changed that much, and how these guys were using their abilities to fight in that type of bulky armor and defend themselves. Wow. So I have a series of different things. Team Ready, which is how do you build an emergency and disaster team in your community. That's very challenging for people. You have a lot of people like, oh, I'm taking care of me and my family. But we already know that the way we've made it this far is through collaboration and coordination with tribes, with groups, us being in groups and communities, right? Villages, not just one person hanging out with their family. Yeah. That was always very bad for us. It didn't work out really well, right? Hanging out in it, with your one farm, and then the bad guys come and they wipe you and your family out, and there's nobody there to help you. So us working together. So Team Ready is really that book about how do you develop that and bring that together. So,
and your personal website is?
My personal website is Hakim, which is Hakim, as in Mary, Isler, Isler. So Hakim-Isler.com. And they can find all of my different things on there, as well as the Soil Foundation and my self-defense business.
This will post the day after Veterans Day. We certainly appreciate your service to our country. We wish you the best of luck in Moore County. Hakim Isler, survivalist, ninja, the Black MacGyver. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on Paradise in the Pines. Thanks, Dan. Hey, if you want to learn more about tourism in Moore County, go to our website, which is homeofgolf.com. Go to watch some of our videos. Our YouTube channel is Home of American Golf. This has been Paradise in the Pines, and we'll see you next time.